You are incompetent, Valerie. You've been bleeding this company dry for years, and it ends tonight. My father said those words sitting at the head of his own dinner table, a glass of Merlot in his hand, a roast beef going cold in the center, and a pre-typed resignation letter already waiting under his bread plate. He'd planned the whole thing, the seating arrangement, the timing, the audience, all of it. I didn't flinch. I didn't raise my voice. I looked at him, then at my daughter sitting next to me, and I folded my napkin slowly, set it beside my plate, and said 5 words. I understand. Hand me the letter. And that was the moment something inside me snapped. If you've ever been the one holding a family together while they planned your exit behind your back, hit that like button and subscribe. Let me take you back to the beginning so you understand exactly what was on that table and exactly what they were throwing away. My name is Valerie Miller. I'm 44 years old. I've been a widow for 8 years. My husband Mark died in a structural collapse at a job site when our daughter Lily was 3. After the funeral, I didn't take a sabbatical. I didn't disappear. I went back to work at Miller Heritage Woodworks the following Monday because 46 families depended on their paychecks, and the quarterly order for Wilson Home Goods was 3 weeks out. My father, Gregory Miller, started the company in 1993 in Portland, Oregon. A 20-person shop making handcrafted furniture out of reclaimed timber. Good product, honest work. But when I joined 17 years ago, the books were a mess, the client list was shrinking, and the production line was running 2 weeks behind on every order. I was 27 years old with steel-toed boots and a clipboard, and I rebuilt that operation from the floor up. I memorized every proprietary finish formula, every curing protocol, every kiln cycle down to the minute. I knew the humidity sensitivity of white oak versus red oak versus walnut. I knew which clients wanted hand-rubbed satin and which ones wanted catalyzed lacquer. I knew the lead times for every supplier within 400 miles. I was the institutional memory of that company, walking around in work boots and sawdust while my father stood in the showroom shaking hands. Over 17 years, I turned that 20-person shop into a regional powerhouse. We landed the Wilson Home Goods contract, $12 million annually. That single deal represented 41% of our revenue. I negotiated it. I managed it. I personally oversaw every production run tied to their specifications. Their buyer, Tom Wilson, had my cell number. Not my father's, not Cole's, mine. And for all of it, I was paid $140,000 a year, the same salary I'd been making for a decade. No raise, no renegotiation, no acknowledgement. I didn't push because the company was my husband's legacy too. Mark had built the original kiln room with his own hands. His initials were still carved into the doorframe, but I wasn't just underpaid, I was subsidizing them. Over the past 5 years, I deferred $425,000 in earned bonuses to keep the company's cash flow liquid during supply chain crunches. $425,000. Money I was owed. Money I earned by hitting every revenue target tied to the Wilson contract and 3 other major accounts. I deferred it voluntarily because my father said the company couldn't afford the payout, and I believed keeping the doors open mattered more than my bank account. In 2021, the primary kiln failed. Complete electrical overhaul needed. The quote came in at $40,000. My father refused to touch what he called the retirement fund, so I paid for it. $40,000 out of my personal savings. I didn't tell anyone except the repair crew. I wrote the check, watched the install, and went back to running production the next morning. I drove a 2006 Chevy Silverado with 220,000 miles on it and a faded bumper sticker peeling off the tailgate. I parked it in the same gravel lot every morning for 17 years. The transmission shuddered above 60. The heat only worked on the driver's side, but I maintained it myself on weekends because I didn't see the point of a new truck when the company still owed me nearly $500,000. Then Cole came home. My younger brother, 37 years old, 7 years younger than me. He'd gone off to get a weekend executive MBA from Willamette University, the kind of program where you fly in on Fridays and fly out on Sundays and come home with a diploma and a vocabulary full of words that don't mean anything on a production floor. He showed up 4 years ago in slim-fit Burberry blazers talking about disruptive innovation and scalability and brand verticalization. He didn't know the difference between a mortise and a tannin. He couldn't tell you the cure time for our heritage oak finish if you held the spec sheet in front of his face. But he had the degree, and more importantly, he had the last name and the gender my parents preferred. They brought him in at $180,000, $40,000 more than I was making. 0 experience, 0 client relationships, 0 institutional knowledge, and then they started dismantling everything I'd built. It was slow at first, subtle. Cole was copied on emails I used to receive alone. Then client meetings were rescheduled without my name on the invite. Approvals I'd handled for a decade were suddenly routed through Cole's office. My father stopped asking me for quarterly projections and started asking Cole to present them. Cole, who got the numbers from my reports, reformatted them into slide decks with gradient backgrounds and buzzwords and presented them as his own. I told myself it was just my imagination. I told myself my father was mentoring his son the way he should. I told myself this was simply what family did. You make room. But it wasn't mentoring. It was replacement. 4 years of watching my access shrink, 4 years of watching Cole take credit for contracts I maintained, systems I designed, relationships I built one handshake at a time. My father stopped introducing me to new vendors. My mother, Martha, started making comments at Sunday dinners. Valerie, you'd look so much more professional if you didn't dress like the maintenance crew. Cole has such a natural executive presence. Some people are just born for leadership. You know, Valerie, not everyone is meant for the boardroom. There's no shame in being good with your hands. She said that last one while pouring herself a second glass of Chardonnay, and she laughed. Not a cruel laugh. Worse. A dismissive one. The kind of laugh that says you're not even worth getting angry at. My father said nothing. He sat at the head of the table, eyes on his plate, hands folded. His silence wasn't neutral. It was permission. 2 weeks before the dinner, I saw the writing on the wall. Cole had been named interim COO in an internal memo I wasn't copied on. I found out from a production supervisor who thought I already knew. I sat in my truck in the gravel lot at 6:47 that evening, engine off, and I called David Brooks. David was a forensic employment attorney, 61 years old. Practiced out of a small office in Lake Oswego. No website, no social media presence. Just a reputation among people who needed someone who could read a contract the way a surgeon reads an x-ray. A colleague from the Portland Manufacturing Association had given me his card 3 years earlier and said, "Keep this. You might need it someday." I told David everything. The deferred bonuses, the kiln repair, the salary disparity, the client rerouting. And most importantly, I told him about 2 documents, my original 2006 employment contract and the 2018 shareholder agreement. David went quiet for 11 seconds. I counted. Then he said, "Valerie, do you have original signed copies of both documents?" I did. "In a fireproof safe in my bedroom closet." "Then you don't have a problem," he said. "You have leverage, specifically Section 9.4. Section 9.4. The Change of Control Clause. It stated that if a qualifying change in executive leadership occurred, meaning if I was removed or replaced as VP of Operations, all deferred compensation and unvested equity would accelerate immediately to full vesting. The payout would be calculated based on a formula tied to company valuation and my accrued benefits. I hadn't written that clause. Mark's attorney had insisted on it back in 2018 as part of a broader shareholder restructuring. I'd almost forgotten it was there. David hadn't. He told me to do nothing. Change nothing. Say nothing. Just wait. I didn't have to wait long. The dinner was October 12th, a Friday, my parents' house, the dining room with the walnut table my father had built the year I was born, crystal glasses, cloth napkins, roast beef with horseradish cream, rolls from the bakery on Hawthorne, a bottle of 2016 Merlot open and breathing on the sideboard. I brought Lily. She was 11, quiet, tall for her age. She wore a green sweater she'd picked out herself and sat beside me with her hands in her lap, already reading the room the way kids do when they've spent their whole lives watching adults pretend. Cole was already seated when we arrived. Burberry blazer, no tie, sleeves pushed up to his elbows like he'd seen it in a magazine. He had a leather portfolio in front of him that I recognized as one of the company's client presentation folders. My mother, Martha, was pouring wine. My father sat at the head of the table. And there, at the far end, sat Sarah Scott, my aunt, Martha's sister, the company's HR director. Sarah had a manila envelope in front of her. I knew what was in it before she opened it. The first 15 minutes were normal, polite. Cole talked about a trade show he'd attended in Chicago. My mother complimented his new watch. My father asked Lily about school, but didn't listen to her answer. He was watching me the way a man watches a clock when he's waiting for something. Then Martha turned to Lily. "Lily, sweetheart, Grandma and Grandpa need to talk to you about something." Lily looked up. Her fork was halfway to her mouth. "You know how we talked about setting aside some money for your college? That little fund Grandpa started?" Lily nodded. She'd been told about it since she was 7. $50,000. Grandpa's promise. She had a savings tracker on her bedroom wall with a handwritten label that said, "College Fund from Grandpa." Martha smiled, not warmly, efficiently. "Well, honey, that money needs to go in a different direction now. Your Uncle Cole has some really exciting plans for the company, and the family needs to invest in his vision. It's not that we don't care about your future. It's just that sometimes grown-ups have to make hard choices about priorities." Lily's face didn't crumble. It froze. Her eyes went wide and glassy, and her hand dropped slowly to her lap. She didn't cry. She just looked at me with an expression no 11-year-old should ever have to wear. The expression of someone who just learned that a promise made to a child isn't worth the breath it was spoken with. I stayed quiet. My jaw was set. My hands were flat on the table. Cole leaned back in his chair and said, "Family backs family, Valerie, but you're just a glorified foreman. This seat is for someone with a real education." My father cleared his throat. Sarah opened the manila envelope and slid a single sheet of paper across the table toward me. "This is a voluntary separation agreement," Sarah said. 3 months of severance. Standard release of claims. We think it's more than fair given the circumstances. Gregory picked up his wine glass. "You are incompetent, Valerie. You've been bleeding this company dry for years, and it ends tonight." The room went silent. The clock on the mantel ticked once, twice. Lily's small hand found my sleeve under the table, her fingers twisting the fabric until her knuckles went white. I looked at the letter. I looked at my daughter. I looked at every face at that table, the ones that were smiling and the one that was staring at his plate. And I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity. Nothing. The quiet wasn't heavy anymore. It was sharp. It was clear. I picked up the resignation letter. I read every word. It was exactly what David Brooks had predicted it would be. 3 months severance. A general release of all claims. A non-compete clause covering 18 months. And a forfeiture of all deferred compensation upon signing. They'd buried the forfeiture in paragraph 9, sandwiched between a confidentiality provision and a return of property clause. Small font. Dense language. The kind of sentence a person skips when they're emotional, when the room is pressing down on them, when their father just called them incompetent in front of their 11-year-old daughter. I wasn't emotional. I read paragraph 9 twice. Then I set the letter down, reached into my bag and pulled out my own pen. Not the company pen Sarah had placed beside the document. Mine. A black rollerball I'd carried in my bag for 6 years. Mark had given it to me the Christmas before he died. It had a small scratch on the clip from the time Lily used it to draw a horse when she was 4. I uncapped it slowly. Martha leaned forward. Cole sat up straighter. My father took a sip of his Merlot. Sarah folded her hands. They thought I was about to sign their document. I turned the letter over to the blank backside. In clear, deliberate handwriting, I wrote one sentence. I didn't rush. I didn't pause to think. David Brooks and I had drafted this language word for word 2 weeks earlier. I'd memorized it the way I memorized Finnish formulas. Precisely. This resignation is conditional upon the immediate and full settlement of all accrued compensation, bonuses, and the accelerated vesting of all equity under Section 9.4, Change of Control, of the 2018 Shareholder Agreement. I signed my name beneath it. Valerie R. Miller. Dated it. October 12th. Noted the time. 7:42 p.m. Then I turned the letter back over, signed the front where they had indicated, and slid both pages to the center of the table. "I understand," I said. My voice was level, steady, like I was reading a spec sheet to a new hire. I've written my terms on the bottom. I'll be out by Monday. Nobody moved. Sarah picked up the letter first. She read the front, nodded. Then she flipped it over. Her lips moved slightly as she read. Then they stopped moving entirely. "What is this?" she said. "My conditions," I said. Cole laughed, a short, nervous bark. "Conditions? You don't get to set conditions. You're being let go." "I just resigned," I said. "Voluntarily, with conditions. They're on the page." My father set down his wine glass. "Valerie, you signed the letter. It's done. Sarah, file it Monday morning." "Greg," Sarah said. Her voice had changed. The authority was gone. She added language. "I need to have Arthur look at this before we file anything." "It's a resignation letter, not a contract negotiation," my father said. "It references Section 9.4, Sarah said. The table went quiet again. My father's jaw tightened. Martha's smile faltered for the first time all evening, a crack in the porcelain so brief you'd miss it if you blinked. I pushed my chair back. Not fast, not dramatic. Just the slow, deliberate movement of someone who was finished with dinner. "Lily," I said, "get your sweater, honey. We're going home." Lily stood up immediately. She didn't look at anyone. She kept her eyes on me, and I kept mine on her. I took her hand. "You can't just walk out," Cole said. He was standing now. The leather portfolio was forgotten. "We're not done here." "I am," I said. I walked around the table, past Sarah, who was already reaching for her phone, past my mother, whose fingers were wrapped so tightly around the stem of her wine glass that I thought it might snap. Past my father, who sat motionless at the head of the table, eyes fixed on the letter like it had grown teeth. I stopped at the front door. I crouched down to Lily's level. "You okay?" I said. She nodded. Her chin was trembling, but she held it. "I'm okay, Mom." I squeezed her hand once. Then I opened the door and we walked out into the October air. The porch light cast a yellow circle on the steps. The leaves on the birch trees were turning. The Silverado sat in the driveway where I'd parked it, old and dented and humming with 220,000 miles of reliability. I opened Lily's door first, buckled her in, walked around to the driver's side, put the key in the ignition. The engine turned over with its usual low, steady rumble. I didn't look at the house. I didn't check the rearview mirror. I pulled out of the driveway, turned left onto Burnside, and drove. Lily was quiet for 6 blocks. Then her voice came from the passenger seat, small and cracked right down the middle. Did Grandpa really mean all that? I kept my eyes on the road, my hands at 10 and 2. "He meant it," I said. "What about my college fund?" "I'll take care of it, Lily. That's my job, not theirs. Not anymore." She was quiet for another mile. Then she said something that landed in my chest like a stone dropped into still water. "I'm glad we don't have to pretend anymore." I didn't respond. I couldn't. Not without my voice breaking. So I reached over and put my hand on hers, and we drove the rest of the way home in silence. If you've ever had a family member treat you like you didn't matter, hit that like button and subscribe. That night, after Lily was asleep, I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of coffee that went cold 2 hours before I noticed. The house was dark except for the glow of my laptop screen. The street light cut through the blinds in thin, pale lines across the floor. I opened my email. I typed one message to David Brooks. Subject line: "It's done." I attached a photo I'd taken of the signed letter, front and back, before I'd slid it across the table. I'd taken it while everyone was watching Sarah open the manila envelope. Nobody noticed. Nobody ever noticed what I did. David replied at 11:14 p.m., 4 words. "I'll file Monday morning." I closed the laptop. I sat in the dark, and for the first time in years I felt the weight lift. Not happiness, not triumph, just clarity. Like a window had been cleaned that I didn't even know was dirty. The weekend passed in silence. My phone didn't ring. No texts, no voicemails. They were probably celebrating. Probably already discussing how to divide my responsibilities, how to absorb my clients, how to erase 17 years of institutional knowledge with a slide deck and a Burberry blazer. Monday morning, David filed the conditional resignation with a formal demand letter to the company's registered agent. He attached copies of my original 2006 employment contract, the 2018 shareholder agreement, 5 years of deferred bonus documentation totaling $425,000, and a detailed accounting of the $40,000 kiln repair I'd funded out of pocket. Tuesday passed. Nothing. Wednesday at 9. 17 a.m., my phone rang. It was Arthur Wright, the family attorney, 62 years old, had handled my parents' legal affairs since before I was born. His voice sounded like a man who hadn't slept. "Valerie, we need to talk about this letter." "Talk to David Brooks," I said. "He's my counsel." "Valerie, please, let's handle this as a family." "We tried that Friday night. You have David's number." I hung up. At 11:42 a.m., my phone buzzed. A text from Cole. "Call me. Now." I deleted it. At 2:15 p.m., Martha called. I let it go to voicemail. She left a message I could hear without playing it, her voice sharp and compressed through the tiny speaker. I deleted it without listening. At 6:30 p.m., the doorbell rang. I looked through the peephole. Gregory Miller stood on my porch. He was wearing the same khakis and fleece vest he wore every day to the shop, but they looked like he'd slept in them. His eyes were red-rimmed. His jaw was working, grinding back and forth the way it did when he was trying to control something he couldn't control. I opened the door 6 inches, kept my hand on the frame. Didn't step aside. "Valerie." "Dad." "Arthur called me this afternoon. He ran the numbers on that clause you referenced, Section 9.4. I said nothing. "He says the accelerated vesting alone puts the payout at $2,100,000. I said nothing. $2.1 million, Valerie. We don't have that kind of liquidity. You know that. You've seen the books." "I built the books," I said. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. "This will break the company." "You broke the company Friday night?" I said. "You just didn't know it yet." "I'm asking you. Father to daughter. Please. Come back to the table. We'll tear up the resignation. We'll forget this whole thing happened." "And Lily's college fund?" He blinked. "What?" "The $50,000 you promised her. The one Martha redirected to Cole's vision. Where does that go?" He didn't answer. He looked at his shoes. The same way he'd looked at his plate every time Martha said something cruel. The same way he'd looked away for 17 years. "That's what I thought," I said. "Valerie, you can't do this. We're family." I kept my voice steady. I kept my hand on the doorframe. I looked my father directly in the eyes. "I understand. I've written my terms. I'll be out by Monday." The door closed softly. No slam. Just the quiet click of the lock sliding into place. 3 days later, Arthur Wright called Gregory at 8:12 a.m. I know because David Brooks received the follow-up call 14 minutes later and relayed every word. "You didn't read the fine print, Greg. By forcing her out and naming Cole as successor, you triggered the change of control clause. The check is for $2,100,000, and it's due now." Gregory tried to negotiate. Arthur told him there was nothing to negotiate. The 2018 shareholder agreement was ironclad. The conditional language on the back of the resignation letter was legally binding. David Brooks had already filed the formal demand with supporting documentation, 5 years of deferred bonus records, the kiln repair receipt, the salary disparity, the equity formula, every number checked, every clause referenced, every date time-stamped. Arthur told Gregory he had 2 options: pay the $2,100,000 within the contractual window, or face a breach of contract lawsuit that would put every asset of Miller Heritage Woodworks into discovery, including the retirement fund Gregory had been protecting like a family heirloom while his daughter drove a truck with a shuddering transmission. The calls started that night. Cole called twice. I declined both without hesitation. Martha called 4 times between 7 p.m. and midnight. I let everyone go to voicemail. I deleted them without listening. Sarah Scott sent a 3-paragraph email at 11:47 p.m. asking me to consider the impact of my actions on the broader family. I archived it unread. Gregory didn't call. He showed up again. Wednesday evening. Same porch, same fleece vest. This time Martha was with him. She was wearing her good coat, the camel-colored one she saved for restaurant dinners and client events. Her lipstick was fresh. Her eyes were not. I opened the door the same 6 inches. Valerie, this has gone far enough, Martha said. Her voice was controlled, but I could hear the fractures underneath. You're holding the company hostage over a dinner conversation. I'm exercising a contractual right, I said. You're punishing your family. I'm collecting what I'm owed. Martha's composure cracked. $2 million, Valerie. Do you understand what that does to us? To your father's retirement? To Cole's plans? I understand exactly what it does, I said. I built the spreadsheets. Gregory put his hand on Martha's arm. She shook it off. Your brother has a family to think about, Martha said. He has responsibilities. He has a vision for the company's future. He has a Burberry blazer and my client list, I said. That's not a vision, that's a costume. Martha's jaw clenched. Gregory stared at the ground. Where's your apology to Lily? I said. Neither of them answered. That's what I thought. The door closed. Same soft click, same lock sliding into place. 3 weeks of escalating offers followed. Arthur Wright called David Brooks 6 times. Each call was shorter than the last. They offered $800,000, then $1.2 million, then $1.6 million with a structured payment plan. David rejected everyone. The contract was not ambiguous. The amount was not negotiable. The clock was running. On November 4th, 23 days after the dinner, Miller Heritage Woodworks wired $2,100,000 to my account, plus $47,000 in legal fees. I watched the notification appear on my phone at 3:17 p.m. I was sitting on my couch. Lily was at the kitchen table doing homework. The house was quiet except for the scratch of her pencil. I didn't celebrate. I didn't call anyone. I set the phone face down on the cushion beside me and sat there for a long time, breathing. That evening, I went through my contacts methodically. I blocked every number. Cole, Martha, Gregory, Sarah Scott. I removed myself from the family group chat. I deleted the shared photo album. I removed Gregory and Martha from Lily's emergency contact list at school and replaced them with my neighbor Janet Taylor, who had been watching Lily after school for 2 years without ever being asked twice. I didn't do it in anger. I did it in clarity. The cut was clean. I heard what happened next through industry channels. Portland's specialty manufacturing community is small. People talk at trade shows. Suppliers compare notes. And David Brooks kept a file, not because I asked him to, but because he said documentation was a habit he couldn't break. The first crack appeared 48 hours after I left. A production run for Wilson Home Goods shipped with the Heritage Oak finish cloudy. Not ruined, cloudy. A slight haze across the grain that anyone who knew the formula would have caught at the curing stage. The issue was humidity calibration in the kiln. I had monitored it manually for 11 years because the digital sensor drifted above 62%, and nobody had ever bothered to replace it. I'd compensated by hand. Every single batch. Cole didn't know the sensor drifted. Cole didn't know the formula required a 7-minute extension at the 3rd curing stage when ambient humidity exceeded 48%. Cole didn't know any of it because Cole had never stood in front of that kiln at 5:30 in the morning with a hygrometer and a clipboard. Wilson Home Goods flagged the shipment. Their quality team sent photos. Tom Wilson called the shop directly and asked to speak with me. He was told I no longer worked there. The second crack came 6 weeks later. A custom dining set for a residential client in Lake Oswego arrived with joint separation along the apron rails. The mortise and tenon joints hadn't been glued with the correct adhesive for the wood species. It was a basic error. The kind of mistake a first-year apprentice makes, and the kind of mistake I would have caught on the floor before it ever left the building. The client posted a 1-star review online, then another client did, then a third. By February, 3 production supervisors had resigned. 2 of them had been with the company longer than Cole had been alive. They told colleagues the same thing. Nobody listened to them anymore. Cole overrode their recommendations. He changed curing schedules to increase throughput without understanding the material science. He replaced 2 suppliers with cheaper alternatives that didn't meet the original specifications. He was optimizing a machine he didn't understand, and it was coming apart at the seams. In April, Wilson Home Goods formally canceled their contract. $12 million annually, 41% of revenue, gone. Tom Wilson sent a brief professional termination letter citing repeated quality failures and lack of responsive communication. He didn't mention me by name. He didn't have to. The dominoes fell fast after that. Suppliers who had extended credit for years began demanding payment up front. The company's revolving line of credit was frozen after the bank reviewed the revenue projections without the Wilson account. 2 more craftsmen left. The shop floor went from running 2 shifts to barely filling one. Gregory canceled his retirement. At 70 years old, he was back in the shop 6 days a week, trying to manage production schedules he hadn't touched in a decade. Martha stopped hosting Sunday dinners. Their financial advisor restructured their portfolio and recommended selling the building. The company headquarters, valued at $4.5 million, went on the market in July. It sold for $3.8 million, less than they owed on the combined mortgage and line of credit. Cole's Burberry blazers disappeared. He was photographed at a Portland manufacturing mixer in a wrinkled button-down and khakis, talking to anyone who would listen about restructuring and pivoting. Nobody was listening. His credit score had dropped to 489. His wife, Tiffany, moved to her parents' house in Bend with their 2 children in August. They separated quietly. By October, exactly 1 year after that Friday dinner, Miller Heritage Woodworks had lost 73% of its revenue, all 4 of its major retail accounts, and 11 of its 26 employees. The name was still on the building, but the building belonged to someone else now. I heard all of this secondhand, through trade publications, through David Brooks, through the quiet murmur of an industry that noticed when a company that made beautiful things stopped making them. I didn't seek any of it out. I didn't need to. I was somewhere else entirely. The lake house was 38 miles outside Portland. 2 bedrooms, a screened porch, a dock that jutted out over the water with just enough room for 2 chairs and a fishing rod. I bought it for $850,000 in cash. No mortgage, no monthly payment, just the quiet sound of water against wood in the mornings. Lily had her own room. She painted it sage green herself. I held the ladder while she did the trim with a brush that was too big for her hand and a focus that reminded me so much of Mark that I had to look away for a moment. She made honor roll in November. She joined the school's woodworking elective in January, came home with a birdhouse made of cedar that she'd sanded by hand. She set it on the porch railing and said it was for the chickadees. I started a consulting practice. Small, deliberate. I helped 3 regional manufacturers restructure their operations, the kind of work I'd been doing for free for 17 years. I charged $350 an hour. My first client was a furniture shop in Salem that had been struggling with finish consistency. I walked their floor for 2 hours, identified 3 calibration issues, and wrote a 12-page protocol. They implemented it in a week. Their reject rate dropped by 60% in the first month. I wasn't rebuilding an empire. I was building something the right size, something that fit. One Saturday morning in October, exactly 1 year after the dinner, Lily and I sat on the dock. I had coffee. She had hot chocolate. The lake was still. The air smelled like cedar and wet earth in the last of the summer. Mom? Yeah. Do you ever think about Grandpa's shop? I took a sip. Set the mug on the armrest. Sometimes. Do you miss it? I thought about that for a long time. The kiln room at dawn. The smell of fresh-cut walnut. Mark's initials on the doorframe. I miss the work, I said. I don't miss the table. Lily nodded slowly, the way she did when she was processing something bigger than the words. I think you did the right thing, she said. I looked at her. 11 years old. Legs dangling off the dock. Hot chocolate cupped in both hands. The same steady eyes Mark had. The same quiet certainty. The paperwork was the only thing keeping you at that table, I said, more to myself than to her. Now you're just a man in an expensive suit sitting in an empty room. Lily tilted her head. Who are you talking to? I smiled. The first real one in a long time. Nobody, sweetheart. Not anymore. The lake was still. The chickadees were at the birdhouse. The coffee was warm. I never regretted a single second of it. If you enjoyed this story about protecting your children and knowing your worth, hit that like button and let me know what you think in the comments. And if you haven't subscribed yet, make sure to subscribe and ring that notification bell for more stories just like this one. Thanks for watching.